Good morning, ni hao, and sawati kap, and good day, and howdy, and all the other greetings. Eugene Clark from the Sydney City School of Law here. I'm the Dean of the Law School, and I've been asked to say a few words about taking exams now that we have HSC Legal Studies and other exams. And I'm not going to be talking at last minute about legal studies particularly, but to offer just some general comments which I hope may be useful whether you're taking the exams now in 2016 or if you're watching this video at a later date. It was Aristotle many years ago when he wrote his very famous work called The Rhetoric, mentioned that there really were three elements of effective persuasion, something that you learn in a law degree. And those were ethos, logos, and pathos. And so I thought I might divide my comments into that category. And the first one was ethos, that you are persuasive to the extent that you have credibility, that you know what you're talking about, that you have experience, and that adds to the persuadability, if you will, or persuasiveness of your message. And so let me say from that standpoint, as you can tell by both the absence and the color of my hair, I've been around a long time, 40 years in university teaching and still counting. And in many ways, I've both been tested and I have been a tester. I've been tested in the sense I've done 5 degrees myself, 2 a master's and PhD here in Australia at the University of Tasmania, and also obviously 3 degrees in the United States. I've been a legal studies teacher myself for many years. I then went on to the university. I became the chief examiner of legal studies together with Professor Don Chalmers. I was involved in creating the book that most schools used at that time for legal studies. And I've obviously taken many tests like this, the 16-hour bar exam to be admitted as a practitioner in the United States, the GRE to get into graduate school and a postgraduate program in the U.S. The ACT was the national test that we had to do in terms of university admission, LSAT test to get into law school, etc. So I have both been a tester and been tested. So when I make these comments, I'm really drawing on that experience over all of those years. There's not a lot of time to say a great deal, but let me just mention just a few points. That brings us to the second point of Aristotle. The second part of being persuasive is the logos. It's your logical arguments, it's your content, it's your examples, it's the major points that you are making, and it's the reason, if you will, of your argument. And so in that respect, let me divide this up to, first of all, talking about before the exam. The most important thing, I think sometimes people panic a bit. They start studying extra hours and disturb their sleep patterns. They may give up exercise. Suddenly they're eating lots of junk food that they don't usually eat. And I think it's so important to realize that doing well on an exam, I think, takes the mental, the physical, the psychological, the spiritual, whatever you've got. And it's so important to go into the exam period being rested, being fit, paying attention to diet, and that, of course, is a daily habit, but you should give special, I think, importance to that, particularly in the weeks and months leading up to the exam, and even more so in the days of the exam. You want to make sure you're well hydrated, you're eating well, sleeping as well as you can, and go into it as rested as you can so that you perform as best as you possibly can. And it's certainly a disaster if you're thinking of staying up all night. I've done that as well. And I think the worst performances I've had occurred when I tried that and I didn't get sufficient REM sleep, because as you're sleeping, your mind is recategorizing, it's organizing, it's putting things in the right places, it's doing that deep learning that's important for you to be insightful, to make sure that you're answering the question. So please do not, either by cutting sleep or eating a lot of extra junk food or whatever, don't ruin your performance by those things, and those are an important part of exam success, just as they are in success in anything else. Secondly, the exam itself, and I want to look at that in two parts. Whether legal studies exams or most exams, you often have an essay component and you have a multiple choice component. On the essay component, let me make a number of comments. One is overall it's important to remember when you're sitting the exam, what evidence are the examiners looking for? And if you look, for example, in legal studies at the HSC syllabus, you want to demonstrate knowledge and understanding of legal issues relevant to the question. So it's not just a dump essay where you memorize a bunch of stuff and no matter what the question is, you spill it out. That is not going to get you very high scores. So you need to demonstrate the ability not only to know it, but to apply it, particularly in the context of a question. To be able to communicate relevant legal terminology and concepts. So when you're studying, you should pay attention to concepts and terms. Make sure you use them correctly, make sure you use them, and define them where relevant as well. Third, refer to relevant examples. And in law, those examples might be in a current event, but the primary sources of law are going to be legislation or particular cases that are relevant or international documents, etc. And the ability to put all that together in a sustained, coherent argument. So that's what you need to be doing and focusing on as both you're studying and when you're taking the particular exam. Secondly, the reading period. I strongly advise, as opposed to looking at one question and just jumping into that, use your reading period to look at the entire exam, to get a sense of all the different issues that are covered. When you're doing that as well, if a question is difficult, you're planning, your subconscious will be working on that question so that you'll have a better sense of how you're going to tackle it once you finally do. And I think that's important as well. And then be sure to read the actual question. I know because I do a lot of writing, I've written about 20 textbooks, and it's so often when I'm editing what I'm writing that I often read what I think is there instead of what actually is there. And that's why, like in editing, you would read something out loud or have someone else read it to you or have someone else edit even better. So too, when you're looking at an exam question, really be careful to read what actually is there, not what you hope is there, not what you thought was there, not a question that's sort of like a question that they had last time. Make sure you're actually reading the question that is there and that you're understanding it, and don't read beyond it, if you will. And I think the way to get the highest marks and the way to be sure to pass is to make sure you're making a fair attempt at taking your knowledge and answering the actual question asked. Thirdly, I would urge you to do the easiest questions first. Don't necessarily do them in order, but make sure you mark them clearly. I think if you do the easiest questions that way, whatever you know and what you feel you know best, you're going to get your best out there. And then the other reason to do the hardest ones first is that factor that your subconscious continues to work on them. And so by the time you're then in the middle of writing your easy ones, the harder ones will be more clear to you. And I've often been amazed that a question that I almost have no idea what it's about when I first read all the questions, by the time 2 hours into the exam I get to it, I got it, I see where that's going. And then away I go. So do the easiest questions first. Fourthly, attempt all the questions. In many years as an examiner, I've been shocked, really, about how many students just don't even attempt a question at all. And if you don't attempt a question, you get 0. And to overcome a 0, that means you're forcing yourself to have to get a very high mark at another question just to be at break even. And yet the easiest points to get on a question are really those first part of questions. So even if you attempt it, you put down what you know, you have a fair go at it, you will get quite a few points. And so even if it's not pass level, if it's just below pass, then a credit will get you to even, where if you have a 0, it will take you a distinction level answer or A level answer to be able to get even to a pass mark. So attempt all questions and don't just waste time writing out the question. 5, do a brief outline before you take off. Again, you're nervous. You want to make sure you you get a lot down on the paper, and there's a real temptation, I think, just to jump into it. Sometimes slower is faster and better. So just keep relaxed. Don't jump into it right away. And instead, think about the major structure. Have that at least in mind. Maybe do a few quick notes, and then follow that outline as you go through it. I remember many years I used to do debating. In my early days, I panicked. As soon as they started talking, I wanted to write down every little thing they were saying, and as a result, I missed the main points. Once I became experienced at debating, I wouldn't write down anything at first. I'd want to get a sense of where they were going, what their structure was on their case, and once I had that structure in mind, then everything that they were saying would make sense, and I had a pattern and a synthesis that gave me a deeper analysis, and I could remember it better, respond better, and did a better job both at debating and structuring my own arguments in response to theirs. 6, focus on as I said, on the detail of the question. Almost every sentence that you write, and in fact, at the very least, every paragraph you write, ask yourself, have I related this to the question? And so don't just assume that it's answering the question. Don't drive it into the ground, but make sure that you relate what you're talking about back to that question. And be thinking in yourself, what does this have to do with the question? How am I addressing the question? How am I answering the question? And tick off every word in that question to make sure that you're dealing with every word, every concept, every component to make sure you've covered it all. If it's a problem type question, I used to check off every fact in that problem to make sure at least I considered it. And so often I'd go to something I hadn't checked and realize, that fact raises a possible defense that I could use, and it gave me an additional point that makes the difference between a high grade and a medium grade, right? Or between a medium grade and a fail grade. 7, provide evidence to support your points. You can't just have general points. You can't just talk about in generality. You have to have what substantiates your points. And that evidence in a law exam are going to be examples, going to be legislation, going to be cases, etc. that you're going to have. So bring in that evidence as you're marshaling your concepts supported by the evidence, all addressed to attack the question. All right. 8. What happens if you have a complete mental wipeout, complete blank? What do you do then? That's happened to me too. I think it's probably happened to everyone. And when that has happened, the way I have survived, I pay attention to my breathing and start trying to calm the heart a little bit. And then secondly, even if I can't understand the question, I don't know what it's about, it doesn't seem to relate to anything that I've studied, I think, I've had this course, I'm going to at least write down what I think might be relevant and put down something. So don't just put down nothing, don't just rewrite the question and show how you can copy the question. At least put down what you know, what you think is relevant, and have a go at relating it to the question. And the chances are, if it's difficult for you, it's going to be difficult for everyone else too. And so don't panic about that, but at least write down something and write down what you know. And finally, on essay questions, pay attention to instructions. It is tragic as well, where sometimes people, they are supposed to answer X number of questions, but they leave one short. They are supposed to number their booklet, but they don't number it correctly. And so you've got to, and again, it may be obvious, it may not, that it fits the right question. So number it correctly, fill out the instructions carefully, pay attention to the instructions. Next to multiple choice questions, just a few things. There's no real tricks to multiple choice. I think the truth is that the best preparation for multiple choice is to know your subject matter. If you know it well, I think you're going to have the best shot at doing well on multiple choice. But there are some strategies that many of the writers on this topic do suggest. One is to try to narrow your choices down. If there's 4 or 5 choices, usually there are 2 that are pretty close. Try to narrow it down to the best 2 and focus your attention not on all 5, but focus on those 2, and you're more likely to get the right answer. If a question uses absolutes, such as never or always, that is usually, according to the research, not the correct answer. Where instead, if a question uses mostly, rarely, seldom qualifiers, that is a clue. It's more likely to be a right answer. Another thing is look-alike answers. You find two answers that look a lot alike, it's highly likely that one of those answers is the correct answer. And so that might give you a clue of what to do. When you're desperate, also look at some of the science. Poundstone is one author who studied thousands and thousands of multiple choice tests. And he points this out, that if a multiple choice contains a none of the above option or an all of the above option, the chances are 52%, according to his research, that is likely to be correct. And so, as opposed to just blind guessing, if you choose one of those options, you are likely to be right 90% more of the time than you will if you don't choose one of those options. So I thought that's a very useful one. Look at the surrounding answers. If the answer to the question before the one you're working on is A, and the answer to the one after that you're working on is D, and you're pretty confident of those, it's likely that the one you're working on is going to be other than A or D. So his research found that as well. If a question has word answers, the one that's the longest, he found, was right a much larger percentage of the time. So again, that's another strategy if you're in doubt about what to do and you're totally stumped. But again, the best preparation is to be prepared, know your stuff, and you're going to do as best as possible. And finally, the pathos. The third component that Aristotle mentioned is that you persuade people by the emotion. That we're not just logic, that our deep part of our brain was where we make most of our decisions. Our cerebral cortex, we use our logic to justify the decisions we make. And emotion is a big part of it as well. And in terms of an exam, controlling your emotions beforehand, but after, I would urge you this. I would not engage in any postmortem discussions after. So often students will want to know, oh, what did you put down for that? What did you put down for this? And you can be in a total panic and ruin your entire holiday period or whatever until you get your results back. Sometimes when I was in, you'd have to wait a year for the results, thinking that you had failed or done poorly because other people didn't have what you had. And yet you may find that actually you scored highly and they did not. If the problem was difficult, it may be difficult for everybody. So don't waste time or energy or emotion worrying about how you might have done. Just wait and suspend all judgment until you actually get that number, and then you can deal with it from that standpoint. And then finally, emotionally also don't panic. If your score is lower than you think, oh, I've got to have a 99 to get in to Sydney, or I've got to have a 4.0 to get into Harvard, or whatever. Life is over if I do not. That is simply absolutely not true. That today, the wonderful aspect about higher education everywhere is that there are multiple pathways and multiple doors to get where you want to go. Just as one example, here at Sydney City School of Law, we have 20 bonus points if you've done debating, if you've been a school prefect, if you've been a captain of your sporting team, we interview people to look at challenges that you may have overcome, to look at the grit factor, because there's a lot of evidence that someone has overcome a significant challenge, they're going to be successful in their career and in doing law as well. And so many universities, in fact most, also you can enroll in a degree with a lower ATAR, and then after a period of a successful year you can transfer in to do law after that. Many people do a first degree in another discipline and then do law as their second degree. So if law is in your heart to do, in the case of law, which is my area, there are many pathways to get there to do it. Law is about life. It's not like medicine, where you've got to know the science, and that gets very stale very quickly. In law, the more experience you've got, you're going to actually be a better law student. So if that's in your heart to do it, whether it's law or really almost anything, there are multiple pathways this way to do it. So enjoy the exam experience as best you can. Relax, do your best. Good luck to everybody. I hope these comments have been a little bit useful. Again, Eugene Clark, Sydney City School of Law, saying good luck to all those exam takers, particularly at the HSC Year 12 now.